Welcome to Relish Books. Today is my review of The Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. This is a book I've had on my list for quite a while. I heard about it years ago. I remember thinking it sounded interesting. I've heard only positive things about it. Not that I'd done a ton of research before reading it, but it was on my list. I found it at the used bookstore, and so I got it, even though, once again, as I've mentioned several times already, really don't like this cover. I've seen much nicer covers elsewhere, but it's not like I loved the book, so I think I'm okay with sticking with this. I might redonate it or something. But at first, I didn't care for it. I mentioned this in another video. I felt like the writing was very overdone. I know the tone that he's going for is this very dignified, that's kind of the whole premise of it, very dignified English butler, and the way that he would talk, the way that he would express himself, and it felt very forced on paper. It felt, like I said, it felt over the top. It felt like overdone. There were so many extraneous phrases and words, very repetitive words, little catchphrases that he would use over and over. He started way too many sentences with the word indeed. And this is the tone that he's trying to set from this character's perspective. And I get that. It was still difficult for me to really accept. It didn't feel like an English butler talking. It felt like somebody trying very hard, overly hard, to sound like an English butler. But as the story went on, I got more used to it, and I became more interested in the story, because at first it just wasn't that interesting to me. And also, thinking about English butler characters, from shows, and the way that they talk, and how real that feels, kind of helped. If you picture Carson from Downton Abbey or something, speaking in this way, it feels a little more real, because that is kind of the way that he talks. It's just hard to accept it on paper, because it feels overly done. Even if it is authentic, it doesn't feel like it to me. And I never really fully got over that throughout the course of the book, but I did end up enjoying the story. I really enjoyed the way that you figure things out through this perspective without his ever telling you. There's a lot of things that you quickly catch on to that he won't admit to you, that he's not admitting to himself. Or maybe not that he's not admitting, but that he doesn't intend to share in his thoughts and reminisces as he looks back over his career, over his relationships with his employers and fellow employees in this great English household. So I think my favorite thing about it, and something that's kind of sad too, it's kind of a sad tone that the book has, is of course his relationship with Miss Kenton, the housekeeper, who they kind of have a romance, and of course you were kind of assuming from the beginning that they did, but he doesn't ever really admit that in any way. For most of the book, he doesn't ever, and not ever in so many words, does he ever really admit that. And the only exchanges, I really enjoyed this as a book. If there was a good part, because I don't care for the writing, but something that was very well done is how you get this, by his telling you what did happen, that's how you see from their conversations, from their very limited conversations where they're usually arguing and having a big problem with each other, from the things that they say, you surmise everything that isn't being said. And I really like that, because so many writers, most writers, over-explain everything. And I really liked how from their behavior towards each other, which most of the time is very silly and rude, you see their attraction. Even though they seem like they hate each other and they're always being mean to each other, you realize that this is the way that they're interacting because of their attraction. And so I thought that was fun to kind of see that. And also, because he's the one telling you these things, you only actually get indications of what his actual behavior was at times based on conversations that he remembers with other people where they'll mention him doing a certain thing and behaving a certain way that he hasn't told you and isn't going to tell you because from his perspective, he wasn't behaving in that way. And it's from other people's comments that you realize a lot of his behaviors and stuff. So I enjoyed that, and I enjoyed the ending. I thought it was really good. It was like it was like serious and sad, but also satisfying. Kind of this thought that, the remains of the day, so to speak, referring to the ending of one's life, that the final years of one's life can be pleasant. It's likened to how the evening of the day is oftentimes people's favorite part, and how the final years of one's life can be, in some ways, the best part of life. So I really liked that. And yeah, it was kind of fun reading about just the practices of these big households and reading it all from the perspective of a butler. His attitude and thoughts about what it means to be a butler, what it means to properly serve an employer was interesting. Again, I didn't love the tone. I think the thing that was the biggest problem for me was that I had high expectations for the book. I think that was what let me down a bit, because it's a fine book, but to me it was nothing really special, and I'd always heard it held up as being something very special. And so, yeah, I think I had just heard it hyped up a lot, and so it didn't really fully meet my high expectations. But it's a fine book. It's an enjoyable read, especially if you can kind of get past the tone. And it's kind of sad, again, in tone. I don't generally love it when books are all or almost all in retrospect. Everything important that's having happened in the past, just feels sad. You want to be experiencing those things as they happen. And when you're looking back on the past from this perspective of like an older person who most of their life has gone by, it just is kind of a melancholy feeling. And this sense of aloneness and emptiness, and that all the bustling, important things of the world are gone now from this person's life. But that is the story. And so, yeah, I don't know. It wasn't my favorite in the world, but it was fine. Had some good things about it, some things that I didn't love. It can get a little tedious that everything is, again, in his own mind. Everything is just reflections back to the past. So there's not a ton of dialogue. Mostly it's just the thoughts in his mind, him describing everything. And so it kind of feels closed in. There's not a large cast of characters that you get to know very well, because it really is, the entire story is really within the confines of this one person's mind. But it's also not a very long book. So I feel like that would have gotten a lot more tedious and cramped if it had gone on longer. But it's a pretty good length. So those are my thoughts. I guess I'd give it like I don't usually do stars, but maybe well, 3 sounds so low, but 4 sounds a little too high. I don't know, maybe like a 4 or 3.5. Yeah, solid-ish book, but I didn't personally love it. But I think I just had my expectations a little too high. So those are my thoughts on The Remains of the Day. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.